You're listening to I Have Some Notes, a podcast supported by listeners like you. To contribute, visit patreon.com/I Have Some Notes.
What's the deal with these brand biopics? Who asked for these? Air Jordans? Flaming Hot Cheetos? Ferrari? Since when are products chronicled like people?
What about an absurdist send-up of these movies about the history of Pop-Tarts?
Sure, but who would want to make that?
Jerry Seinfeld.
Great!
2024 Jerry Seinfeld.
I have some notes. Welcome to I Have Some Notes, the movie podcast with cuts, keeps, punch-ups, and tweaks on mediocre movies. I'm your host, Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
And I'm Greg Beaver.
And today we are discussing Unfrosted, the Jerry Seinfeld Pop-Tarts Netflix comedy extravaganza that you've definitely watched eagerly. And we are, of course, joined today, once again, by Robyn Slack, musician, playwright, podcaster, friend of the show, movie aficionado, and brought in specifically for deep Jerry Seinfeld, not necessarily fandom, but knowledge.
Lore.
That's
lore.
accurate. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here as always.
Now, Robyn, in addition to all those accolades, I recently discovered, because you tagged us on Facebook, that you also have a comic that you write and illustrate. And would you please just save some talent for the rest of us?
I mean, that one that ended many years ago. That's
Okay.
an archival. So I have saved that. If someone wants to take up the webcomics mantle in 2024, by all means, go for it. It's an uphill battle for sure. But yes, I don't know that I bring like Seinfeld expertise to the table. I don't claim to have like studied it or anything. But I watched a lot of it. I directed an improv show called What's the Deal at the Edmonton Fringe, which was just Seinfeld, the improv show. And as Greg referenced, I have a webcomic, or had a webcomic, that did a series of R.L. Steinfeld, which was matching up R.L. Stein Goosebumps with Seinfeld, basically doing Seinfeld horror comics. And they were a lot of fun. I was very proud of those. They're posted to the I Have Some Notes Discord. If you're not a member already, you should be.
Oh,
Agreed.
yes, appreciate
I've
the
podcasted before.
Yeah, it's that love of the concept of Seinfeld that I thought to invite you on for this one.
Big fan of it as like
Seinfeld.
a formula. Yeah. Absolutely.
Since I know this was everyone's first time with this movie, because why would it be your second? It's new and it's also fine. So I want to actually ask, how do you guys feel about Pop-Tarts? Like, when was the last time you ate a Pop-Tart?
My kids like the occasional Pop-Tart, so we keep them around. So I have had some relatively recently. They're fine. Much like this film, they're fine.
I got a lot of nostalgia for them. I liked them a lot as a kid. I don't buy them often because I just like can't justify as an adult being like, you know what I need is Pop-Tarts. But I'll buy them occasionally. If they're like on sale or something, it'll be like a little nostalgic treat for me. But I recognize that is all rooted in like childhood experience. And like there's nothing about the Pop-Tart that deserves that level of fondness. You know, it's the memories.
I will say I'm a sucker for like weird flavors coming out. So every now and then they'll come out with like a seasonal Pop-Tart and I'll be like, I'm going to have to try that. And I will say the last two Christmases, 2 years ago, they had a gingerbread Pop-Tart. And this past year they had a sugar cookie Pop-Tart and they were legitimately delicious. They were actually like, this is amazing. This tastes fantastic. I would be buying gingerbread Pop-Tarts all the time if they made them.
Greg?
I think the last time I had Pop-Tarts was sort of kind of middle pandemic. I think probably just like, looking for anything to bring me some semblance of joy, And I was like, oh, well, the only thing we can do here is order food from Walmart and eat and nothing else. So I might as well get a sugary snack for breakfast. I'm kind of like Robin, though. I don't really, I get them very sparingly. I'd probably buy them more if my daughter would like them, but she doesn't really care for them. So yeah.
Good. Yeah. I bought some specifically to watch with this movie on my last grocery trip. But before that, it'd been a couple years, though I will admit, during my bachelor days, it was like a spell, like a 2-year chunk where it was one of my preferred stoner snacks in the middle of the night. And then because it's not quite a cookie, like it was kind of like, instead of getting Oreos or Chips Ahoy, or instead of getting a box of sugary cereal, I'd kind of split the difference and get Pop-Tarts.
I will say, one of the companies I used to work for had a snack wall, where they just regularly had like a whole cupboard, shelf really, full of different kinds of snacks, just available for people to have whenever. And they regularly stocked Pop-Tarts amongst the snacks. And I had some coworkers who would just grab a packet and eat them raw as a snack. And I say raw as in untoasted.
I guess that's the next question. How do you like them? Because I normally was eating them raw, and then Amanda got me hip to freezing them.
I've heard that before. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I ate Pop-Tarts for this movie, they were frozen, and that was actually pretty good.
I'm a toasted
so you basically
boy.
eat them anyway, but the intended way.
And I say, I toast mine. I'm a Christian. I'm not a Christian. In this one respect, I am an honorable Christian man, and I toast my Pop-Tarts.
God intended. Well, of course, Unfrosted is a Netflix release. It came out in May of 2024. It was directed by Jerry Seinfeld, written by Jerry Seinfeld, Spike Feresten, Andy Robin, and Barry Martyr, and is based on a somewhat edible breakfast pastry. It stars Jerry Seinfeld as Bob Cabana, Jim Gaffigan as Edsel Kellogg III, Hugh Grant as Thurl Ravencroft, Amy Schumer as Marjorie Post, Max Greenfield as Rick Ludwin, Melissa McCarthy as Donna Stankowski, and so many comedian cameos.
Did anyone think to check whether any of these characters are actually real people? I did not.
I don't know about Rick Ludwin and Donna Stankowski, but pretty much everyone else is.
Okay.
The Jerry Seinfeld's dude is not a real, like Bob Cabana didn't exist, but he's based on a real guy who I believe was named William Post. And so they changed the name mostly because the other company is called Post, and it would be really confusing if the main guy was named Post. But he's not one of the Post family, because Marjorie Post is also a real person.
Yeah.
But they are not related to, it's just a coincidence that they have the same last name. So yeah, Jerry Seinfeld's character is not a real guy, but kind of based on a real guy. I did look into that for one of my fixes.
Fun fact, there was, however, a Bob Cabana. He was the director of Kennedy Space Center. So he actually worked for NASA.
Oh, weird. Okay.
In roughly that time period. So
Also funny, when you ask like which of these characters are real, I just ignored Jerry Seinfeld's character entirely when I answered. I was like, it doesn't matter about him. He's a straight man. I was more talking about the like
Edsel Kellogg and
or even like Carvel and Schwinn.
Sure, yeah.
Well, Elaine was definitely a real guy.
Yeah, Jack LaLanne. Well, that was the thing. So those five guys. So what was it? Jack LaLanne,
Chef
Boyardee, Tim Carvel, Werner von Braun, and the Schwinn bicycle guy. And I leaned over to him and I'm like, it's weird that it's 4 real guys and then Chef Boyardee. And then I looked it up and Chef Boyardee was a real guy. But I'm like, why would they have 4 real guys and then Chef Boyardee? That makes no sense. And then oops, he's a real dude.
Yep.
Though it wasn't Werner von Braun, though.
What did I say? I said Werner von Braun. What was the guy's name?
That he was playing. Hold on.
Harold. Oh, not. Sorry, I was close. Harold von Braunhut. Harold von Braunhut. Yeah, Werner von Braun was an actual Nazi, whereas Harold von Braunhut was just racist.
And he is a real guy, or he's
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, he's the inventor of sea monkeys, is a real guy named Harold von Braunhut. And he, even though he was Jewish, he just like, according to the Sea Monkeys Wikipedia page, quickly distanced himself from his Jewish family and was like openly part of the KKK.
Wild.
Cool guy.
Yeah, cool dude.
Yeah,
Jack LaLanne, though, actual cool dude. Just a weirdo. Actually, I'll start with that for the discussion of this movie. I did like that the world that this movie takes place in, on one hand, it is just kind of that like list of references, like, hey, remember this from the 60s? But it's so much of it that it just like shapes the world that this movie exists in, where just everything is like a weird thing kids liked in the 60s. Like every corner of the world is just based on bullshit from boomers' childhood memories.
Right down to like Tom Brokaw just playing with a new toy every time he does a news. Walter Cronkite, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, the Walter Cronkite bits, if we're getting into like, what did we like about the film? Those worked for me. Those were pretty good.
Yeah, overall, what do we think of this movie?
I feel a lot like the neutral president in Futurama. Like I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other.
I think the movie is very colorful. I thought that the production design was well done. It really captured that. This is going to sound weird. Breakfast cereal heightened reality, like the kind of reality you see in a breakfast cereal commercial. It perfectly captured that. I felt like I was watching an extended breakfast cereal commercial, and that is kind of the highest praise I can give this movie in a way, because it totally nails that tone.
Especially the pacing. Like, there were a lot of scenes that were like under 30 seconds, so it makes sense that it felt like a commercial. It was kind of flying. I came into it. I feel like Jerry Seinfeld is a weird celebrity in that, like, he almost had my ideal like fame experience, where he like very early in his career created maybe the most beloved sitcom of all time, pretty universally acclaimed, ended it on his own terms, made just boatloads of money, and then largely disappeared from the public eye and hasn't done that much since that. Like, you know, not a recluse, not a Bill Watterson situation, but like, it feels like anytime he dips back into the public eye, it's fully by his own choice, that he could have just like finished Seinfeld and been like, I'm set for life, I'm out. And so like, the fact that he's dipped back in so few times means that every time he does, it feels like it places an outsized importance on it, that it's like, really, you did all of this and you got out and you're like beloved and you're rich and everything's great, and then you're going to come back to make B movie? That's the thing that you're going to step out of your retirement for, and like risk tarnishing your legacy is to make B movie. Oh, okay. And even that one, it like kind of became a meme and still like, you know, worked in the pop culture zeitgeist. It took a while to get to that status, but it's like, I don't know. He keeps coming back for more, and every time it's like, and especially this time because he spent the entire press tour being a weird cancel culture guy and being like, you can't make jokes anymore because the left. And I was like, you're gonna come back out like this to make a Pop-Tart movie? Like,
I don't even understand that, because he's one of the cleanest comics out there. Like, there's no jokes that he's got, I think, that would get him canceled.
It's his. There's one specific joke that he can't tell, and he's been mad about it for like 10 years. There's several articles about Google Jerry Seinfeld gay French king. He just has a very non-joke about how like people on their phones feel so important. Oh, I'm on my phone, I have to be available all the time, I'm so important. But when we're scrolling through them, you look like a gay French king, and people get offended by this joke, and he's like, I can't even make my gay French king joke anymore. And I feel like people more get confused because it's like, what why does the king have to be gay? What is that adding to the joke? Like, it's just not a good joke. It's not that it's like, it is offensive, but in the laziest, most benign way. It's mostly just like, it's just bad. It's just not a good joke, Jerry. Anyway.
Yeah.
I could go on.
He's been weird lately. Like, there's a bunch of stuff of him, doing the whole boomer cancel culture. You can't make jokes anymore. Everyone's too sensitive bullshit at like college graduation speeches.
Yeah.
And then I recently saw him on that other Netflix thing that John Mulaney, Everyone's in LA. He's on the first episode and he is just a really obnoxious asshole. Like, to the point where I'm like, I don't understand what he's got this air of like, he's too good for it. He thinks it's all very silly, but then tries to lean into that for laughs. And it just makes him look super obnoxious, especially because they make this very strange choice to bring him out alongside a guy who works in like coyote conservation in Los Angeles. And I'm like, oh, this guy's coming out with Jerry because Jerry probably like bankrolls, like pays for this charity. Maybe it's a cause he cares about. And he's the celebrity to kind of like lube up the conversation for a person who works in a nonprofit on a talk show. And it's like, no, they just had two guests come out at once. It's really weird. It's a really weird segment. And I don't recommend watching it, but I don't not recommend it. It's strange. It's a strange segment.
I think post, Seinfeld, Jerry Seinfeld, it has been his strongest when he's been doing comedians in cars getting coffee, and him just nerding out with other comedians, which is usually pretty delightful, and he does have a strong insights into the craft, even if they are dated at times, but he is a true comedy nerd by the truest sense of the phrase. So I think I appreciate that about him, but I think whereas someone like Dave Chappelle frustrates me because I think he's smart enough to know better about the things that he's talking about. I think Dave Chappelle is a very thoughtful person, and I think he thinks about these like issues in a very critical way, and yet he still can't seem to understand why he's getting on the wrong side of people. That to me is very frustrating because he seems like he should know. Whereas Jerry Seinfeld, I don't feel
it's just the lead paint talking.
No, I don't even think he's interested in engaging with that type of subject matter at all. And this movie is in some ways a kind of an example of that, where he takes on like certain elements of, current events, but doesn't really have a comment on them, or is there's no true parody of it. It's just like, hey, you remember the time a guy with horns ran around the Capitol? We're doing that too.
Yeah, it's wild that the Pop-Tarts movie has a whole extended January 6th Capitol riots sequence that somehow manages to not have a take on it.
Yeah.
It has no commentary whatsoever. Just remember January 6th?
Yeah.
That I'll talk about it later, but that scene really, really irked me in an otherwise charming, going on mediocre movie.
I actually, I have that. One of my fixes involves the mascot riot, but
okay.
Yeah. But I think that's just kind of who Jerry Seinfeld is. Like, he's not a political guy, and he's not interested in being that or engaging with it. But when he's in interviews, he chooses to run his mouth off about that stuff anyway. And I think that's where he, is his worst enemy.
And I also think that's why this movie is getting such terrible reviews, is just the cultural reevaluation of Seinfeld has everyone our age and younger being like, why are we listening to this crusty old curmudgeon shaking his fist at a cloud? We don't need this. Oh, he made a very, very silly Pop-Tart movie. Downvote, 0 stars.
Exactly.
When it is not a 0-star movie, it's just a 2.5.
Yeah, I definitely came into this being like, is this worth Jerry Seinfeld wading out into the public eye again. Like, is this worth the damage it's going to do to his reputation, having run his mouth off in all these interviews? And on that metric, I would say it's a colossal failure. It is certainly not worth that. But as just a film, I think it's fine. Yeah.
If it had just been the film, it would be fine. The problem is he ran his mouth. If he had just smiled and said, "See my Pop-Tart movie," it would have been fine.
It's just it's a risk anytime he steps back out in the public. Like, he got away clean. We all have fond memories of Seinfeld. Anytime he does a new thing, that's a new opportunity for us to all Google him and find that section of his Wikipedia where he dated a 17-year-old in his late 30s. Like, we might not know about that. And then he makes a new movie and we have to find out about that. For example, I'm not,
Yeah. But the movie, it's, regardless of how we feel about Mr. Seinfeld, the movie has its own strengths and weaknesses. Let's go to the plot summary to catch our audience up if they didn't catch the plot of this movie.
In the early 1960s, the American morning was defined by milk and cereal. And the two undisputed giants of the cereal world were Kellogg's and Post.
Major news from the breakfast world. The Post Cereal Company has reportedly invented a shelf-stable fruit pastry breakfast product.
No.
Yeah.
Boy.
It's Post. They did it.
I'm about to finally crush that big red K that never stops glaring at me. How do you think Post did it?
There's always a surprise inside the box.
I wonder if they use xanthan gum.
Xanthan.
Kellogg's is entering the race to reinvent breakfast with the help of Steve Schwinn, Chef Boyardee, and Jack LaLanne.
They're stacking the deck with ringers.
Hey, you know Isaiah Lamb from Quaker?
You Kellogg's people.
We're about to have some very powerful people very upset.
You have to win. Are you making any progress?
It's not to scale, but...
What are you guys, 5 years old? Little John draws better than that. And I think there's something wrong with him.
Bob Cabana is Kellogg's head of development and noted sod enthusiast. The company's arch-rival Post has secretly created the world's first stable breakfast pastry, and it's so delicious children will dumpster dive just to eat a tiny morsel. Bob recruits the help of his former coworker Donna Stankowski, whom he convinces to leave NASA to beat Post to the pastry punch. Marjorie Post calls a meeting of the biggest cereal brands to reveal the launch of their fruit-filled breakfast treat is only a week away. To buy themselves some time, Bob and Stan make a deal with Puerto Rico's sugar cartel to buy all of the world's sugar. A bunch of silly stuff happens, World War III nearly occurs, Kenneth from 30 Rock dies, the cereal mascots do it January 6th, and ultimately, Bob and Stan's gambit works. Kellogg's remains the king of breakfast, and Bob gets his sod.
I think for once, I'm going to start off with something that I liked about the movie. Because...
Please, I actually have a list. I made a list of things I like, mostly to rebuke all the people dumping on this wholesale. But
yeah.
Please.
Yeah, I laughed out loud during the scene where Kenneth from 30 Rock dies.
Same.
Yes.
Best scene in the movie.
I thought that sequence was absolutely fantastic. You just it was inherently silly. They've got this whole NASA test pilot set up, and they're testing the Pop-Tart for the very first time to see if it will toast. And Jack McBrayer comes out and he's in a full astronaut suit, and he's carrying around this big, heavy box of oxygen. And he just he plunks himself down, and they go through this whole sequence where, they put the Pop-Tart down, and there's all sorts of tension being created with him, turning up the toaster dial. He's going too far. He's going to blow. And finally, the Pop-Tart pops and he eats it, and everything's great and grand. And then Jack McBrayer hits the hose for his oxygen. It wings around for a little bit and then goes right to the hot toaster, and kaboom! Vaporizes everyone. Or not everyone, himself. And I was killing myself. It was just a wonderfully built scene with an unexpected ending that was well set up right off the bat. I really appreciated that.
It was the scene right after that, where they're like looking for him, and the dust is settling, and a figure emerges from the dust, and it looks like he's okay. But then it's just a different guy from earlier. He just says, "Don't go over there; it's gross." That got a laugh out loud, and then Jerry Seinfeld radioing in, and then being like, "What happened to Jack McBrayer's character?" And it's like, oh, he got vaporized. But we had a really funny mix-up with this other guy. And that got a second laugh out of me.
Yeah.
Also, Jack McBrayer eating the Pop-Tart without... Like, he had a full helmet on, but then it wasn't until he went to eat the Pop-Tart that I realized his visor is just open the whole time.
So I thought you guys were talking about the scene that came immediately after this, which was my favorite scene. The funeral for Jack McBrayer's character.
Also good.
Specific. And you know what? I realized why. And I love that this movie had the restraint to do this. That scene has the only character in the whole movie who questions the absurd reality that the rest of them inhabit. Every character in this movie takes breakfast cereal 1,000% seriously to create this sort of heightened absurd world. And the only person who is like, what the hell are you people doing, is his widow. And it makes it so much funnier when they're like pouring milk into his grave and they're pouring cereal in. But they could have done that a bunch of times throughout the movie, because the movie is very absurdist and very silly. Yeah. And they could have undercut it many, many times with a character pointing out how stupid everyone is being. And the fact that they only did it the one time, it makes that scene better, and it makes everything around it better.
I did love the snack crackle pop 21 gun salute too.
Yeah,
very good. There was a bit with a woman like crying, like weeping at the grave and cutting a banana into the cereal.
Yeah,
and the widow is in the audience and is like, "Who is she?" And I love that got me as well. Just like, wait, yeah, no, she's the widow. Who's this crying woman with the banana? You and I, Liam, have talked a bunch in like sketch comedy contexts about like this exact phenomenon, that like it's very easy to write a sketch. The easiest line to write in sketch comedy is, wait, what? Because someone does something big and wacky and silly, and it's very easy to have another character bounce off them and go, wait, what? What the hell? What are you talking about? That's crazy.
You're crazy.
And it's always a stronger sketch. Like sometimes it's just inevitable. You need someone to say, wait, what? But if you can get away with not having it, it's always stronger and more funny, because we all get it. We all know it's absurd. You don't need that person in there. And I think you're 100% right about that this movie has more restraint than I would have given it credit for.
Her incredulity, though, also helps to... it enhances the scene specifically because it is a funeral as well. And it is her husband, and it perfectly underscores that he died for nonsense.
Yeah.
And she's the only one
guy. He's the Schwinn bike guy.
Yeah. And she seems to be the only one who's not taking crazy pills there. And it's the scene that Anita and I both laughed out loud at was immediately after Bob gets kidnapped by Big Milk. And he gets forced to walk the aisle, and it's his wife banging on the bathroom door. And she's like, "You've been in there for an hour." And he's like, "How do I wash my mind?" That was the one that got Anita and I pretty good.
I think any scene with Jim Gaffigan in it were some of my favorites. Like I just love Jim Gaffigan. I love his voice and his cadence, and just about everything about him just kind of makes me laugh instinctively. So yeah, I think he was great in the role, and I appreciated he was in this.
The whole cast is great. Like, I was excited to see Andy Daly doing anything, let alone the Quaker Oats guy, Bobby Moynihan as Chef Boyardee. But honestly, the biggest surprise was the kids. The two kids who jump in the dumpster.
Yeah, they were real strong.
Way stronger than kids with comedic lines had any right to be. Like, genuinely very funny delivery from those kids. I was very impressed.
Just like how bra stands for something. No, it doesn't. I have reason to believe that it does.
Yeah, this movie was dense with jokes. It reminded me a lot of like a Zucker Brothers movie, like an Airplane or a Naked Gun, where just like every moment that they could have something very silly happen, they took it.
Yes. Not as much of it hits the way that a Zucker movie does, but it's definitely dense with at least attempts at comedy.
Lots of swings, many misses, but lots of swings, and you got to give him credit for.
Yeah. Like it is. Yeah, I found that as many of the laugh out loud moments I had, there was as many dead silence or right out groans. And overall, it sort of balanced itself out to the point where, like, when I got done with the movie, I was like, that was fun enough.
There were a lot of things that resembled jokes that then your brain catches up and goes, wait, that wasn't a joke. And the one I wrote down was like, in that they're all in Bob Cabana's living room at some point and talking about how the like milk people kidnapped him. And Melissa McCarthy goes, those lactose lowlifes. And then the scene moves on. And it's the kind of thing that, like, I feel like in a sitcom would get a laugh track. And then you'd be like, wait, that's just what they are. They're just milk guys. Like, lactose means milk. There's no joke there. Is alliteration, I guess. But it's like, and I felt like there were a lot of lines like that where it's like, that resembled comedy. But if you think about it for a second, there's really nothing to it.
It had the shape of comedy.
Yeah.
but it wasn't funny.
Yeah. It hits your ear like a joke.
That has the inflection of a joke, but I'm not laughing.
Yeah. The plot is pretty loose too. I get that it's loosely based on history, but I mean, if you're playing fast and loose with it, you could have done better. Also, there are entire plot arcs that just don't go anywhere. Like there's a whole thing with the forbidden post-Kellogg romance. There's the thing with the mascots going on a riot. There's the whole sugar cartel plot, like, which all just get dropped and never mentioned again. And it's like, really? Did we have to have those in there if you weren't going to go anywhere with them, if you weren't going to resolve them or tie them up in any way?
Yeah. And like I liked the overall shape of it being like, oh, we're going to loosely base this around the space race, but instead of the space race, it's this war between the breakfast cereal companies. And I looked into that a little bit, and like there was genuinely like Post announced they were going to do it first, but Kellogg's beat them to market. It's kind of a real thing. So like, yeah, fun setup to build on, that then, like you say, they just like so many things didn't go anywhere or didn't go as far as they could have, or just kind of, there's a whole middle part of the movie that felt like they kind of didn't know, like once they assembled their team, it felt like they kind of didn't know what to do with the team.
Yeah, they picked a bunch of funny characters to put in a room together, and then just came up with a bunch of like loose bits for them to do.
Go ahead, Scott or Greg.
I was just going to say that there's no better example of how they didn't really know what to do with them than the sequence where they all show what they've been working on.
Yeah.
And none of it is even like remotely Pop-Tart related. And they're all kind of like, I would say pretty mediocre to poor gags, that didn't get a laugh out of me. Like the whole thing with the living ravioli and stuff. It's just like, and that one even got a post-credit scene as well. I was like, oh boy.
And the fact that those five, each one of them having their non-Pop-Tart related innovation come together to give him the idea, like on a blackboard, it was like, wow, that's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
Even though it does end up in the funny idea where like the thing they've got is just a piece of paper with a square and some dots on it. Like that's everything they've got to go on. That was kind of funny. That whole scene before, like to get there was, a real stretch and a real groan. Like
the bit is that all of these things are like, it's such a long walk to get to Pop-Tarts from what they're working on. And even still, it feels like that joke structure of like, these guys are all working on random bullshit, and then somehow it coincidentally inspires the Pop-Tart, and we really got to stretch to get there. I can see how that joke would work, and it feels like it needed 3 more drafts to like they put in placeholder stuff for them all to be doing, and we're like, well, we'll come up with something better than tinfoil pants. But like, for example, he's working on tinfoil pants, and then that inspires the rapper. And then, we'll come up with something better than that. And then they just didn't come up with anything better than that. Yeah. Because the Schwinn guys was just like, I'm working on a bike that's small and easy for kids to hold. And then they were like, the Pop-Tart should be easy for kids to hold. I'm like, that's nothing. You don't get a laugh on either the plant or the payoff. That's literally nothing.
Yeah, it sort of is serving to lampoon all of those brand movies that have been popular lately, whether something very good like Blackberry or something forgettable like Flamin' Hot. Sort of the same way Walk Hard parodies the person biopic. But because it's a parody of a formula, it still runs on the same track as that formula. And because of that, it's not like a particularly interesting story because it's very formulaic. Like some of Amy Schumer's Marjorie Post like villain monologues seem like they come out of like a PG family movie of just like, ooh, I'm gonna get like twirling her mustache and shaking her fist at the people across the street. It's kind of nothing because it's a parody of a trite formula. It itself kind of is hollow.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would have appreciated if they had something to say about this new type of biopic, you know, that we've been getting a lot of lately. Because if you've watched all of these, and Air comes to mind when I'm thinking of this. Like, there's a scene in Air where they go down to like the lab where they're making shoes, and it looks like something out of like CSI, like the shoe lab is all like blue light and like steel and stuff like that, like in like these fancy computers and things like that. And it's just like it's so stupid that anyone like that they think that we would buy that is where they made this stupid shoe. Like it's
the shoe lab.
Yeah, it just kind of annoyed me. The movie itself is kind of okay otherwise, but yeah. And like, so there's things like that they could have very easily, taken a piss out of. But most of the time the movie seems more interested in just quick one-off gags, that don't really go anywhere. And that's to its detriment.
I'd love to look at the timeline of the production of this movie, because I feel like I've read that it is based on Jerry Seinfeld has a bit about the invention of the Pop-Tart and like kind of get it like describing it like, you know, creating the atom bomb, but they're creating Pop-Tarts. And that was like the genesis of all of this. But my suspicion is that like, I think a lot of people expected it to be a parody of those brand movies. I was going to say that it was like maybe marketed that way, but I don't even really think it was heavily marketed as a send up of those brand biopics. I think just the timing of when it came out, it feels like, oh, well, of course, that's what it must be. It's a movie about the making of Pop-Tarts. It must be a parody of all of this slate of movies. I think it might just be full coincidence. I think Jerry Seinfeld just wanted to make a Pop-Tart movie, and it happened to go into production at a time when now it feels like it's got something to say about this. But I fully don't think that was his intention, and maybe wasn't anyone's intention involved with the film. Like,
I mean, in that case, it's just a massive missed opportunity. And
exactly, yeah.
And you would think like a comedian of all people would have his finger on the pulse of like, you know, where the cultural zeitgeist is sitting
Seinfeld,
at.
Seinfeld doesn't seem like the kind of comedian who's got his finger on the pulse of the cultural zeitgeist.
I would argue that it's a pretty important skill to have as a comedian, but I mean, I'm not a comedian.
He is on the cutting edge of the gay French king community.
Well, let's get into some actual fixes, because I think there's lots here, but also a lot that can be improved. So we're gonna take a break and come back and genuinely fix Unfrosted.
I'd like to get more reading done, and joining a book club seems like a good idea, but I don't know.
Why not?
Reading a whole book in a month, that's pretty daunting.
What if it was just a chapter, say a week?
That doesn't sound too bad. Still, getting together with a bunch of people, that's a whole evening.
Well, what if it was only half an hour, whenever you wanted to?
That would be great.
The Read Along, a mini book club for your ears.
Join my wife, Anita.
And my husband, Scott.
As we take you on a journey through a good book,
one chapter at a time. Available right now on your podcatcher of choice.
Welcome back. We are talking Unfrosted, the Jerry Seinfeld Netflix Pop-Tart movie. And I want to start off immediately with a fix, if I may. I think we all agree that January 6th ending with the mascots. What are we doing? What was that about? I cut that entirely. That it's not just that, like Greg said, it has nothing to say about those events, but unlike, I don't know, a reference to a different tragic moment from history, like a 9/11 joke or something. The problem I had with that, taking that event so cavalierly as just being this like offhand reference, like remember when some idiot stormed the Capitol in a horned costume? It is America, especially, centrist liberal America's cavalier attitude to the damage Donald Trump is causing that is allowing him to continue to do that. And so the fact that they're just like, that was what a wacky day that was. It's like, no, you almost jeopardized democracy in your country and possibly the world. Like, you are undermining institutions that keep the cogs of progress turning. Don't be glib about it, please.
It's the cinematic equivalent of Jimmy Fallon tussling Donald Trump's hair.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I would push back slightly in that, like, I definitely don't think it should be a January 6th sequence. I get the purpose of the mascot thing in the movie, or like, I think I get what they were trying to do, which is like, you've got a movie that's a lot of people, talking in boardrooms. We want something big and bombastic, a sequence to end things on that's going to be visually interesting and bombastic. Having all the mascots storm the building and smash everything is like a big fun action sequence to do. It shouldn't be a January 6th bit, and then it should also go somewhere, because they do this whole thing. They have the bright idea of having the mascots be the final action sequence, and then it just kind of abruptly ends when they get into the room and he stamps the paper and they're like, well, too late. It's like, no, that should have repercussions of some kind.
I put thought into that. I have a fix for the mascots.
Fix it. Let them cook.
Well, okay, I'm gonna back it up a bit though, because for my mascot bit to work, something else needs to go on in the movie, and I know something that we all agree on because it's something that we talked about in the Discord. The movie lacks proper stakes.
Yes.
Kellogg's starts as the king of cereal and then ends as the king of cereal, and Post is just a bunch of doofuses across the street the whole movie. I think the movie needs to start with Kellogg's in trouble. Edsel Kellogg III is an idiot. He's a well-meaning idiot. He's well-liked. Bob likes him, but he's not a good... He's a Nepo hire. He's not great at the job. Kellogg's has been losing ground for years to Post. And Post is, if I may, eating Kellogg's breakfast. But they then reveal that they are on the verge of releasing this shelf-stable, fruit-filled pastry. And this could be the final nail in Kellogg's coffin. And worse, it still turns out this is stolen proprietary stuff that Bob and Stan had been working on for years ago, but could never crack. So it's personal and it's dangerous. It's personal to Bob because they stole his research, and it's dangerous because it could kill the company. And Marjorie Post is happy about this. She wants to get Kellogg's out of the business. She wants to merge with Kellogg's. She wants to buy it, because I feel like there's some fun wordplay in her talking about her post-Kellogg's world. Because she's merged Post and Kellogg's. And then that could also play into a little bit of the romance, the weird romance. She wants to merge with Kellogg's. She wants Kellogg's to become part of the Post family. She wants to end it. So there's real stakes, and there's a real rush for Kellogg's to try to catch up to wherever Post has taken this research. I think them antagonizing the mascots didn't feel right to me, because I feel like Kellogg's at this point is kind of coasting on the fact that they've got the best mascots. Like Thurl is like their star. He's Tony the Tiger. They've got Snap, Crackle, and Pop. And I feel like the big third act action beat is that the mascots rally to try to stop Post from getting their FDA approval first. So they storm the Post building on behalf of Kellogg's. I think that's where the action sequence needed to be aimed. And then they're rushing to try to stop the FDA guy from stamping Post's papers to buy Kellogg's more time. And I think that that's the big missed opportunity here, is that Thurl leads the charge for Kellogg's because he's loyal to the company and he's loyal to Bob.
I like that a lot too, because there's a scene where, you know, that moment in the hero's journey where it's the darkest and Bob walks out of his front door and the Post people are shaking their fist at him and the milkmen are shaking their fist at him and the
Sugar Cartel.
Sugar Cartel shaking their fist at, and the mascots. And it's like, oh, you don't need a fourth or fifth faction pissed off at this guy. You've already got the sugar guys, the milk guys, the Post guys. Having conflict with the mascots, it doesn't really add anything. And I like that you retool that angle. So we still get the mascot fun without another needless antagonist.
I feel like that would pay off the fact that you've got like Tony the Tiger and Snap, Crackle, and Pop as interesting characters, and they have funny bits, and it pays that off better to have them be on the side of the good guys. Because then you're kind of rooting for them to take the Post building, and then it's maybe even funnier if they get there too late. They've trashed the Post building, but the FDA guys already stamped the paper and left. Like
it's got that moment in the movie where it's like, well, that was our last gambit, and it didn't pay off.
Yeah.
Oh no, all is lost. Wait, love it.
So those are my two big fixes: is put Kellogg's on the ropes to start so that you're really rooting for them as the underdog to get their Pop-Tart out first, and then redo the mascot thing and have them be on the good guy side. Have them trash the Post building. Go after Marjorie Post. Because she's the mustache twirling villain, right? So,
and then maybe you can get some further stakes out of, like, rather than the mascots being mistreated and that being the thing, like you said, Kellogg's is kind of coasting on their mascots. They've had the best mascots the entire time. That's the one thing that's still working, but they're almost out of business. They are on the ropes. They're not going to be able to keep paying the mascots, and the mascots don't know what they're going to do because they're like, we've only ever been Snap, Crackle, and Pop. Like, what are we supposed to do? There's no career in Hollywood for Snap, Crackle, and Pop.
Who am I if I'm not Pop anymore? I am Pop.
So the stakes are, if they don't pull this off, all of the mascots are out of a job, and like they're out on the street, and that could be your sort of emotional connection there as well.
Yeah.
Speaking of emotional connections, I like that you mentioned the stolen research, because I think you're correct. We need bigger stakes, like narrative stakes. Mm-hmm. We also need emotional stakes. No one is really emotionally invested in this in a meaningful way. Jerry's character wants sod and to send his kid to college. Mm-hmm. And like, so you don't need much in a comedy movie like this. You really, you don't need much. But having some kind of emotional reason why it's important for him for this to work. And I think if not the stolen research vindication, then just that, like, Jerry's character, Cabana, should want Pop-Tarts to exist for the same reason Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, loves breakfast cereal, of just like, he wants this world to be made in his sugary image. And it's important to him to, like, something about nostalgic childhood, something about a memory from childhood that is significant to him to succeed. So if Mr. Kelly, Jim Gaffigan wants it for narrative reasons, Jerry wants it for emotional reasons.
Well, and there are further emotional resonances in that, like, he's got a personal stake in this was my research. I need to crack it first to prove that I was the guy. And his loyalty to Edsel as well. Like, I want Kellogg's to succeed. I don't want this company, which I've spent all these years working for, and this guy who's a lovable buffoon who runs the company, who I legitimately like, to go out of business, to get run out of business by Post. That jerk.
That's another way you humanize Edsel Kellogg. He's a well-meaning doofus. He's fucking up left and right, but he keeps the mascots on the payroll while everyone's like, buddy, we can't afford these mascots anymore. You got to cut them. And he's like, no, these are our people. Like, and so you feel like you love him, even though he's a fuck up, because he's good to his people and he's good to his family.
Yeah, I can't put Toucan Sam out on the street. He's got chicks. Like,
yeah. I have a pitch for emotional stakes that is very silly and maybe too dark. But I'll throw it out there. I like in comedy movies, like you were talking, Liam, about this movie needing more emotional stakes, and that, like, yes, it's a comedy, but comedies still need some. And I would go so far as, like, some of my favorite comedies have very silly, melodramatic emotional stakes. Like, because it's a comedy, the stakes can also be comedic and be silly and way over the top. And they still work in the way that stakes need to for the movie, but also they can be another opportunity for a joke. So my pitch is, like, Bob Cabana has some sort of, like, several times alluded to childhood trauma that ultimately, like, near the end of the second act, he opens up about. And it's like, there was a morning when he was a kid where he woke up late and he was making his cereal, and he pouring the milk in the bowl and stuff, and it caused him to miss the bus, and then he needed a ride to school, and then, on the way home from dropping him off at school, his dad got into a car accident and died. And so he, like, but if he'd had a quick, convenient on-the-go breakfast pastry, he would... Like, he loses a loved one due to the fact that Pop-Tarts don't exist, and then that's his motivation, is like, I need to invent something that's quicker and easier and more on the go so that this never happens again.
I think that actually gives him more tension with the milk the dairy industry, because then
milk healed my father.
He could have a grudge against milk.
Maybe it's he spills the milk. He's like pouring the cereal, but he spills the milk, and that's what takes extra time.
And he's got to take all this time to wipe it up. Yeah.
That works on so many levels. I love that.
And then I still love, like, you keep the stolen research angle as well. That's gold. But he has multiple reasons to be invested in this.
Well, then if we've got that great emotional stuff for Cabana, then maybe the research thing is Stan's.
Yeah, that works.
If not Kellogg's, then Stan, it's her research, right? Like,
yeah.
Because she also has no real, like, she's just like, yeah, I'll leave NASA and come help you. I made the right call, is her arc.
Yeah, that was another good beat, though, when both of them are like, you don't really think the moon, really? The moon? And they're like, yeah, no, I don't buy it.
Yeah.
There's some historical thing that I wanted to bring up, which isn't brought up in the movie, and I don't know a way that it could fit.
I think I know what you're going to say, and that was one of my notes too. A real missed opportunity.
I don't know if we're necessarily thinking the same thing, but you want to know what other thing hit the shelves in 1964? Hostess fruit pies. Another shelf-stable fruit-filled pastry. And it's not brought up at all. And I was like, it's interesting they never mentioned the Hostess fruit pie. Now, granted, it wasn't marketed as a cereal thing, but it's basically the same thing, more or less, right?
Yeah. And one of those, like a Wheelo and Silly Putty and Jack LaLanne, it's one of those, like, relics of that era that's synonymous with 60s boomer childhood euphoria.
Which is why I was a little surprised that Hostess fruit pies didn't get a mention at all. And I'm kind of like, it would have been interesting if Hostess had been, like, somewhere in the periphery. Or if it had, like, a payoff joke had been that the Hostess fruit pie comes out before Pop-Tart.
So what I thought you were going to say was the history of Kellogg's. Cornflakes, the original Kellogg, Jim Gaffigan's grandfather, was a weird Puritan lunatic who was like, kids shouldn't have sugar or flavor. It'll make them want to masturbate. So, like, such an easy masturbation joke was left on the table. The whole history of cornflakes is, it's like, they need to be as bland as possible to not stimulate people into committing, hand sin.
Kellogg and Graham, the guy who invented the graham cracker, both were cut from the same cloth. And I think it would have been especially funny considering at one point the Quaker Oats guy legitimately is like, you need religion with your cereal, and that would have been the place to have the joke where it's like, we got out of that. Like,
well, they do say, like, they do have a sequence where they say, they tell him, like, religion doesn't belong with cereal or whatever, which I think is a reference to the fact that, like, the Kellogg's guys were, like, 7-Day Adventists, right?
Mm-hmm. If it was, it's too loose. I think a masturbation joke is just too easy for a comedy like this to not reference the facts. Just have Andy Daly's Quaker Oats guy be like, I remember your grandfather. He refused to put sugar on his cereal so that kids wouldn't touch themselves. That's the kind of man I respected, and that's the kind of man you should become.
And you could even throw in like a PG or PG-13 masturbation joke that would go over the kids' heads and would land on the adults watching the movie. So, it is a missed opportunity for sure.
I had a stray thought that might plug in here, which is I felt weird that like one of my favorite sequences in the movie was the serial funeral, and yet it was for the Schwinn bike guy. And in my brain, it was like, it feels weird that that's not for a cereal person. It's like the whole thing is that it's full cereal honors. It feels like that should be for like some kind of breakfast cereal royalty instead of it being for the Schwinn guy. It kind of works as a joke, and like the wife playing it up of like, wait, why is this all cereal themed? But like, what if, is it Edsel Kellogg is Jim Gaffigan's character?
Yeah.
What if his dad is still in the picture? He's turned the company over to Edsel. Edsel's running it, and he's trying to prove himself to his dad. More emotional stakes. Trying to prove that he can run the company, but he's still around and kind of like overseeing things. And then part of how you ratchet up the tension midway through the movie is that he dies. Maybe he's the one that's vaporized in the toaster sequence. He's like a bystander, but he gets blown up in that. One way or another, this guy dies. The funeral is for him. He's, the head of Kellogg's gets the full cereal honors funeral. And then you could also have him as a presence in the movie, just walking around telling people to not masturbate. Keep calling people jerk offs and stuff.
Yeah.
If my father was still here, you wouldn't have such colorful characters wandering around. That stimulates the mind and the loins.
And then you have an opportunity to cast an older character actor in that role and that,
or an aging comedian. Yeah,
that could be very fun.
Lewis Black, maybe
that's good.
Lewis Black would be very funny.
Lewis Black yelling at you not to jerk off is a very funny addition to this movie.
Oh, that would have been gold. Oh.
And if we want to make room for Lewis Black as Kellogg Sr., can we just cut everything with the talking ravioli monster?
Yes, make room for Lewis Black as Edsel Kellogg II.
Yeah. I love that.
I get that Pop-Tarts are ravioli is a meme, but that was the most nonsensical way to incorporate that meme into this movie. Was to be like, Pop-Tarts are ravioli and also alive and a thing that's going to escape.
Yeah, full of sea monkeys and made by a Nazi. It all adds up. Yeah, it was a very confusing subplot that wasn't funny enough to justify its... No. It felt very like early 2000s lol random kind of humor of like like an Invader Zim joke or something. I don't know.
Are we keeping the bit where they cause the Cuban Missile Crisis by trying to get sugar from Russia?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think
I'm okay with that.
It drives home the parallel with the space race.
Yeah. And it's also fun to have Bill Burr as JFK.
Yeah. I liked his JFK a lot because he wasn't doing, much like I did at the top of this episode, doing just a typical bad Seinfeld impression. Burr wasn't doing a typical bad JFK impression. He was kind of doing his own thing with a Boston accent, which I think he already has.
I would keep,
maybe shouldn't say.
It would keep the Cuban Missile Crisis. I would cut the bit with, I remember there were two like weirdly sexist beats or just like uncomfortable beats with women in the movie. And one of them was Amy Schumer being implied that she had to sleep with the Russian general guy in order to get the sugar out on time. It was like, he'll only do this if you sleep with him. Yeah. And it just like, it didn't add anything for me. Like, I would just cut that implication that she's going to prostitute herself for sugar. And then I don't remember what the other one was. There was something with Melissa McCarthy's character that also like tugged at me. It was like, oh, that's gross. And whatever that was, cut that also.
I did like her flirting with John Hamm.
That was fun. Yeah.
And I didn't mention it earlier. I saw the Mad Men bit starting and my eyes started to roll, and then it was actually surprisingly funny, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm all for keeping the Mad Men bit.
I'm glad, because I'll chime in as someone who has never watched Mad Men. that scene did nothing for me, and I didn't understand what was going on.
Fair enough.
I know that this is Mad Men, but none of the references landed for me. It was just 2 minutes of me being checked out.
Yeah, I think what makes that mostly work, and because I had the same sort of arc as Scott, where I was about to roll my eyes, was going back to that thing of how silly this movie is, and then more or less having the Mad Men guys do the Mad Men thing of like doing like a really serious, dramatic description of the ideal America that they're selling through advertising, and then having them be like, no, this is silly bullshit. Like, you're in the wrong movie. Basically, the joke of that scene was like, they're in the wrong movie. It is tonally inconsistent with the rest of what is going on.
Yeah. And that is exactly why it worked for me. It worked for it
because it's also I mean, obviously it's not an impression because it's his character. It's his, acting legacy, but it was the writing was a spot on impression of Mad Men writing in the middle of this silly movie. So, yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
I have one more minor change, and it's to Thurl Ravencroft. Because he invents the great line very early on in the movie. And I kind of think that you can kind of give him like the smallest of arcs by I like that he's this theater actor who feels like he's too good for these commercials and all that. But if we're going to ramp up to him being part of the people that lead the charge against Post, then I think that if him discovering great towards the end of the movie and then being lauded for it, and then him sort of realizing that like, oh, my skills are actually applicable here, and I'm good at this too, kind of thing, and like I can contribute, so that he sort of like makes his peace with being the mascot guy towards the end. I think that would work really well.
Yeah, like inventing great, like finally gives him the achievement and the stardom that he's always wanted in the theater and could never get. And it completely flips him around, and now he's like famous for being Tony the Tiger.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been trying to find the line read all movie, and it's when he is pep talking the mascots before storming the post offices, he lands on it by accident and the light bulb goes off, and then they storm.
Yeah.
I think the other missed opportunity with Thurl Ravenscroft, I agree with all of that. That's all fantastic. I get what they were trying to do with stunt casting Hugh Grant in that role. I don't think he was fine in it. I didn't find him that funny. He didn't, like, it wasn't a standout performance of the film. And researching it afterwards, I was like, oh, Thurl Ravenscroft is one of the people who's a real guy. And he's the real guy that sings the You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch song in the classic Grinch cartoon. He's like a classic deep-voiced voice actor. And so I think I would recast him with Ralph Ineson, who is the dad from The Witch, and was also the narrator in The Green Knight. If you know him, you know him. He's got like the deepest, most I can't do an imitation. It's like the deepest baritone I've ever heard. And I think he would be inherently funny in that role, and also a better Thurl Ravenscroft, because I didn't know that was the dude that he was. But
if I wanted to keep it as comedians, maybe Matt Berry.
Oh yeah, a similar deep baritone.
Yeah.
Oh, Matt Berry would crush. Yeah. I had like a couple of stray thoughts for little tweaks. The framing narrative felt weird to me. The thing with Jerry Seinfeld and the kid in the diner, and he's stalling to keep him there. Like, the kid's running away and Jerry Seinfeld is telling him the story to keep him there. I didn't feel like that added much to me. It wasn't bad. It just didn't need to be there.
At least the running away part, I get that the kid's looking at the back of the box, especially like the lines like, I'll take the Pop-Tarts, leave the box.
Yeah.
But like refuting the fake history on the box with even faker, dumber history, I think was a fun framing device. But why the kid's running away?
Well, I think the implication there is like, oh, he's embellishing this story with a bunch of weirdness to make it take long enough for his parents to get to the diner. Like he's weaving this whole tale to stall so that the kid doesn't run away. No, right. I don't know.
I feel like if they were doing that, it would have been helpful to cut back to them a couple times and have the kid like want him to get through the story and tell him like you're taking too long or whatever.
Yeah.
Or just be like, was there really a talking ravioli?
Yeah.
Do more of a Princess Bride where you like cut back every once in a while. And maybe that actually applies to, I'll put a pin in it because I was doing quick ones, but I have one final thought to maybe close out on. The other thing, I'm looking at my notes. Oh, it's just a line near the end where they've achieved their mission and they literally say like, we made it to the moon, the breakfast cereal moon. And I was like, we all know that that's the parallel you're drawing. I felt so insulted as an audience member to have them be like, get it? We were doing the space race. It's like, and at the end of the movie when it's like, if I hadn't picked up on this by now, that would be awful. It felt like a slap in the face. Like, cut that line.
Like, when they literally pluck someone from NASA who's working on the space race and people are like, oh, the moon.
That's what it was.
I mean, they literally have a launch scene with a Pop-Tart coming out of the toaster. Yeah.
So yeah, that felt weird to me. And then my like big swing for this was going to be, I feel like most things Jerry Seinfeld is in, the strongest thing you could do would be cast anyone else. Jerry Seinfeld is a smart comedy guy. He's not an actor. He's not bringing much to the table on this. And as we were talking about the framing narrative and like, cutting back to the diner multiple times, if it's a vanity thing and he wants to be in this movie he's directing, he could be in the framing narrative telling the story. And then when we go into the world of the film, it's younger Jerry and it's a different actor who has any acting chops, you know? And someone who will bring any amount of energy to it. I have some pitches. I'd love to hear your pitches for who could carry this movie better than Jerry.
Seinfeld, like his acting performance feels as though he's constantly mugging for the camera. Like he's not, of course, but like that's just how it feels, and that worked really well in his show because he's the straight man in that show, right? So like he's looking out into the audience, going like, "Isn't this crazy?"
Exactly.
But like, yeah. In this, he's not the straight man. He's the one delivering all the craziness. And
I disagree. I was about to say he to his credit, I still think, I like this, have a younger Jerry, but I think to his credit in this movie, he plays the straight man. Every other character is weirder than him, and all of the funniest lines are from other characters. I've seen a bunch of reviews being like, man, Jerry Seinfeld is not funny in this. It's like, I don't think he was trying to be. I think he knew he is best served as the like blank slate POV character, the straight man, and having these wacky characters around him. So,
but I
actually would. Yeah.
I don't know that he ever played it that way. Like you were saying, this movie has admirable restraint in that they have very few wait what scenes, but then they still have a character whose job is to be the straight man, but then he never questions any of the cartoon logic. And I feel like I would have been better served by having someone just match the wackiness of everybody else.
Yeah, I feel like it's a stretch to call him a straight man in the sort of traditional sense. Like, like he might, like you're right. He's the POV character, and maybe there's a lot more wacky characters that are bouncing off of him. But yeah, I feel like Robyn said that he's still accepting all the wackiness and
Fair.
sometimes driving it,
Who do you want to have as young Jerry?
I mean, and I hadn't thought of it as specifically young Jerry until just now, but like the pitches I had, if we're keeping it that this is loosely based on a historical figure and so should be a white dude comedian, you want someone who is like Jerry Seinfeld, but like a more modern choice who might have more energy. John Mulaney. He's already got a relationship with Netflix. He'd bring some of that cocaine addict energy, really bring it up a little bit. But he's very much feels like a modern day Seinfeld in some respects in his stand-up career. And so plop him in there. You want a contemporary of Seinfeld, from his generation, from that sort of sitcom and comedy era. Ted Danson would be a much more charismatic and charming choice. Get the Cheers guy instead of the Seinfeld guy. I think he'd carry this movie better. He demonstrated in The Good Place. He's a strong actor and a funny actor even at this age. And then the fix I always bring to I Have Some Notes. You want, a bold choice from this generation of cutting edge comedy. Tim Robinson would be a hoot in this movie. The I Think You Should Leave guy would be a strong choice, I feel. And much like Jerry Seinfeld is always just doing the same thing. Like, that's a criticism of Jerry's. Like, he's kind of always just Jerry Seinfeld, and it's whatever you bounce off of him, but he's kind of doing the same thing in every scene. Arguably so is Tim Robinson. It's just a much
Tim
wilder
Robinson
thing.
should be the hostess. Tim Robinson should be the hostess guy. If we get Scott's Fruit Pies in here, Tim Robinson is Mr. Hostess.
I like that.
I don't know that the hostess thing necessarily works, but he's definitely the guy to do it, for sure.
And then, if you want to diverge from history more, because, like, why do we need to stick to history? We've changed the name already. Like, you get a lady in there. I feel like Julia Louis-Dreyfus, if you want someone from the TV show Seinfeld to carry this movie, she acts circles around Seinfeld. I think she'd be a strong choice. I think Natasha Lyonne would be fun.
I'll say, not an episode goes by where I don't recommend either Tim Robinson or Ayo Edebiri.
Yeah.
Would be my, get Ayo to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could just name actors all day, but like those, I was trying to think of like in the lens of who is a Seinfeld analog in some way. Yeah, old school Ted Danson, modern John Mulaney, just always doing the same bit over and over ad nauseum. Tim Robinson.
Dig it. I have one last stray thought. It's not even really about this movie. It's more about a different movie that this reminded me of. The heightened reality of this movie. For better or for worse, like it or leave it, mileage may vary. This is the worst case scenario for what Barbie could have been.
Yeah, that is true.
Like, there's an alternate reality where Barbie has this tone and not the, exceptional, exciting philosophical movie that we actually got.
Yeah.
That says it had not a score for or against Unfrosted. It's just like, damn, this is probably what the worst version of the Barbie movie looked like.
They're just trying to do such different things. Like, you're absolutely right. There's so many jokes in this movie that essentially amounted to like, oh, we're going to say something like, because this movie takes place in the 60s, but we have the benefit of hindsight. We can say something like, we'll never make it to the moon. And it's funny because we know in the future that we did make it to the moon. And there are so many of those jokes. And they're very easy and they're kind of lazy, but they're also like, they got laughs out of me because like, it's funny. It's the juxtaposition works because it's not aiming any higher than that. But then you think about something like Barbie of like, oh, you could aim a lot higher and then it would be really disappointing to get this. But because it was never aiming to be a Barbie, it's like, it did what it tried to do pretty well.
So those were our thoughts on Unfrosted. We've fixed it up, I believe, but we also had some thoughts from our audience, though we realized I think the thing that's most exciting about this particular film isn't the film itself or Jerry Seinfeld or any of the comedy or the tone. It's Pop-Tarts. It's the cultural relevance of Pop-Tarts. So we asked our listeners, what are your thoughts on Pop-Tarts? And we've got some responses. A Ratlin says, going for the alternative. I tried them once. They are irritatingly sweet with additional artificial fruit sweetness. I don't get why they are so popular, but if you like it, dig in.
Fair.
What are your guys' favorite flavors of Pop-Tarts?
Well, I already mentioned gingerbread and sugar cookie.
I learned through the Discord that there are regional flavors of Pop-Tarts, and apparently the States gets way better ones. Because Canada keeps trying to push those combo packs of blueberry, strawberry, raspberry, none of which are the best Pop-Tart flavors, but those are the only ones you can buy in bulk. So given the selection we have here, I'm a s'mores defender. S'mores Pop-Tarts all day.
It seems like every country's got a particular foodstuffs that they just go crazy on the alternate flavors of. Like we're pretty big on potato chips, and we get like crazy flavors that nobody else seems to. Japan has Kit Kats, just like an endless amount of different Kit Kat flavors, and that's the Pop-Tarts for whatever reason is the States version of that.
I like the fruit ones or the chocolate ones.
I think those are the only ones I've ever had. I don't think I've had
that's all of them,
wide variety of them yet.
Like, sorry, specifically the strawberry ones and the triple chocolate ones.
Oh yeah, okay.
As opposed to like the s'more or a blueberry. So
gotcha.
Intra 86 says hot take: brown sugar is S tier. Cherry is the best of the fruit flavors. The rest of the fruit flavors are mid at best. Everything else is sub-fruit flavor. Haven't had one in many years, but apparently my preferences are written in stone in my soul. And this is where we learned about American flavors of Pop-Tarts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Comment.
Yeah. I do want to try brown sugar. I think that would actually be pretty good.
Yeah, it sounds like the perfect Pop-Tart flavor. I wish we had it here.
Yeah.
I'm going to go check those specialty candy stores on White Ave.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just buy some Pop-Tarts and sprinkle some brown sugar on top. Maybe that'll work.
And Aaron commented, how are there no apple pie Pop-Tarts? What are we even doing here? Which, correct.
Yeah.
You know who does have an apple pie? Hostess Fruit Pies.
Yeah, that's usually that is usually the first thing when you're doing something pastry and you're going to add a flavor to it that you think of. It's like, let's put apple and cinnamon in it. There you go.
Maybe they knew they'd never stack up to the fast food, the McDonald's hot apple pies. They're just like, no, we can't compete. We can't compete. They're not going to deep fry them at home.
How is there not a peanut butter?
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Oh well.
Maybe
the lab are on it.
Maybe Reese has got a patent on it, and they just can't negotiate with them to release it.
Well, thank you very much, Robyn, for joining us for Unfrosted, bringing your Seinfeld lore expertise to the table. We appreciate it. It's all paid off. It was all for this.
Excellent. My life has been leading to this moment.
And now it's over.
I mean, we just had a kid, so yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Anything you want to plug, Robyn? Of course, our podcast, Quantum Kickflip.
Yeah, weirdly, again, the aforementioned kid, I have very little going on that you can check out, currently. But I have two wonderful seasons of the podcast, Quantum Kickflip. Definitely check that out. It's a fantastic show. Very, very proud of it. Currently on hiatus due to baby reasons, but we'll see what the future holds. But great time to get caught up. We just completed our second season. Both seasons very strong. All available completely free on internet. Find it where you find your podcasts. Quantum Kickflip.
Indeed. And you can follow us on social media, facebook.com/I have some notes, @I have some notes on Twitter, @I have some notes pod on Instagram, or as always, please come join our Discord server. You can find the link to it in the link tree on any of our socials on ihavesomenotes.com. We're having a great time in the Discord chatting everything from, hey, this trailer looks cool. Hey, we've got our own notes for the upcoming episode. Hey, did you guys see who, is got a scandal or news, just movie news? Just great movie themed discussions going on in there. Josh Scar from Talking Smack, regular participant. And also, if you haven't checked out Talking Smack, our good friends over there have some awesome episodes. Really just come interact with us, or at the very least, like or subscribe or review this episode wherever it is you happen to be listening to it.
Yeah, that helps us out. You know what else helps us out? Is if you have a couple extra dollars, you could throw them our way. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/I have some notes. That helps pay the overhead and keep the lights on over here and keep us in fancy sodas and pizza. So
it stocks the snack cupboard full of
Pop-Tarts that we eat cold and frozen. So yeah, you can head over once again, patreon.com/I have some notes, because that is also a great way to help support our podcast.
And hey, the Twisters is coming out soon, and don't go see that. Instead, listen to us in about a month when we create our version of the original Twister. So join us for that. And before we go, a good friend of the show, Robyn from Cinematological, just got married, so huge congratulations to him and his partner, and we wish them all the best.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Until then, I'm your host, Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
I'm Greg Beaver. Keep watching the skies.